Ned Quartermaine in General Hospital. The elegant halls of Port Charles have witnessed countless betrayals, but none quite as shocking as what was about to unfold at Bobby's diner on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. What began as a seemingly innocent meal would become the catalyst for one of the town's most devastating revelations of poisoning. Plot that would shatter families and expose a betrayal so profound that not even the strongest bonds could survive it. The collapse. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Bobby's as Ned Quartermaine sat at his usual table enjoying what he thought would be just another ordinary day. He had been in good spirits catching up with Joe Palmy about the moving arrangements for the Quartermaine estate. But as the moments passed, something felt terribly wrong. Ned's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his glass. A strange sensation crept through his body, a tightness in his chest. A burning feeling spreading from his stomach outward. He tried to steady himself, gripping the edge of the table, but his vision began to blur. His breathing became shallow and labored. "Something's not right," Ned whispered to himself, loosening his collar. The room began to spin, and suddenly his hand lost its grip on the chair. His body went rigid for a moment before collapsing to the floor with a sickening thud. The other patrons gasped in horror. Emma and Joe rushed over. Immediately, their faces pale with shock. Without hesitation, someone called. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, their sirens wailing through the quiet streets of Port Charles as they transported Ned to General Hospital in critical condition. The hospital vigil, the Quarter mansion emptied in mere moments. Olivia Quartermaine rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding as fear consumed her every thought. This couldn't be happening, not again. Not after everything the family had already endured. She found herself in the emergency room surrounded by beeping machines and the urgent voices of medical professionals. "His heart is failing," Dr. Lucas Jones told her gravely as he reviewed the initial test results. "We need to stabilize him immediately." Olivia's face crumpled as tears began to stream down her cheeks. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. This was her husband, her life partner, and he was slipping away before her very eyes. She stood by helplessly, watching as the medical team worked frantically to keep Ned alive. Lulu Spencer arrived moments later, her face etched with concern. She immediately wrapped her arms around Olivia, offering what little comfort she could in this moment of unimaginable pain. "He's going to be okay," Lulu whispered, though even she didn't sound entirely convinced. "Ned is strong. He's fought through so much." But as the hours dragged on, it became clear that Ned's condition was deteriorating. The doctors ran test after test, searching desperately for answers. Then, during one particular examination, they discovered something alarming in his blood work: traces of poison. "Poison?" Olivia gasped, her voice barely audible. "How is that possible? Who would do this?" The terrible truth. As Ned lay in his hospital bed, drifting between consciousness and unconsciousness, he knew he didn't have much time left. The poison was doing its work, ravaging his body from the inside out. In a moment of desperate clarity, Ned reached out for Olivia's hand. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice weak and strained. "Listen to me. There's something you need to know. Something important." Olivia leaned closer, her ear near his lips, desperate to hear every word. "Drew," Ned managed to say. His eyes filled with both pain and regret. "It was Drew T. He poisoned me. I don't know why exactly, but I know it was him. I saw him near my drink at Bobby's. He's capable of this, Olivia. He's capable of anything to protect his secrets." Olivia's entire body went numb. Drew Kane, her son's cousin, a man she had known for years, had done this. Had deliberately poisoned her beloved Ned. The anger that began to well up inside her was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was raw, consuming, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You're absolutely certain it was Drew?" "Yes," Ned whispered, his grip on her hand weakening. "I'm certain. Don't let him get away with this. Promise me, Olivia. Promise me you'll make sure he pays for what he's done." But before Olivia could respond, Ned's eyes began to flutter shut. His breathing became even more labored. Despite the doctor's best efforts, despite their desperate attempts to save him, Ned Quartermaine's heart finally gave out. He was gone. Olivia's fury and Dante's investigation. The weight of Ned's death crushed Olivia like nothing else ever could. She stood alone in the hospital hallway, her whole body shaking with rage and grief, intertwined into one devastating emotion. But even through her pain, one thing was crystal clear in her mind. Drew Kane had killed her husband, and he needed to be held accountable. Without hesitation, Olivia made her way to the Port Charles Police Department. She stormed through the doors, her eyes blazing with determination. She asked for Dante Falconer immediately, and when he appeared, she laid out everything Ned had told her. "My husband was poisoned," Olivia stated flatly, her voice cold as steel, "and he told me before he died that it was Drew Kane who did it. Drew deliberately poisoned him. I want him arrested. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Dante listened intently, his detective instincts kicking into overdrive immediately. This was a serious accusation. And while his mind initially resisted believing that Drew could be capable of something so heinous, he knew Olivia well enough to understand that she wouldn't come to him with a false accusation, especially not one involving the death of her husband. "I'll look into this immediately," Dante assured her, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in a gesture of support. "If Drew did this, we will find the evidence. And we will bring him to justice. You have my word on that." The search for evidence. Dante threw himself into the investigation with a determination born from both duty and personal investment. After all, Ned was family, even if it was a complicated family relationship. The detective began to piece together the timeline of that fateful Tuesday afternoon at Bobby's diner. He collected the glass that Ned had been drinking from, along with the remnants of his meal. Every single item was carefully catalogued as potential evidence and sent to the lab for analysis. Dante then began interviewing everyone who had been at Bobby's that day: patrons, staff members, anyone who might have seen something, anything that could help crack the case. The poison analysis came. Poison analysis came back within hours. It was definitely a lethal toxin, one that required significant knowledge to obtain and administer. The lab technicians suggested it was something a chemist might have access to, or someone with connections to criminal elements. With this information in hand, Dante obtained a warrant to search Drew's home. As officers went through Drew's residence, they discovered something crucial. A small vial hidden in a locked drawer in Drew's study, containing traces of the same poison that had killed Ned. But there was more. Dante also uncovered communications, encrypted messages between Drew and an unknown associate, discussing removing obstacles and clearing the path to a larger goal. The messages were vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, but they suggested premeditation and planning. The final confrontation. When Dante finally confronted Drew at the police station, the congressman seemed surprisingly calm, almost as if he had been expecting this all along. "You think I poisoned Ned?" Drew asked, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. "That's an interesting theory, detective, but I'm not sure you have the evidence to back it up." Dante leaned forward, his eyes boring into Drew's. "We found the poison in your home. We have witnesses placing you at Bobby's. We have motive. Ned was becoming a problem for you, wasn't he? With his family connections and his moral compass pointing directly at your corrupt dealings." Drew's smile never wavered, but something flickered behind his eyes of recognition that his carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. "Even if all of that were true," Drew said, "you'd need to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And good luck doing that, detective. I have the best lawyers money can buy." But as the investigation continued, more pieces fell into place. Toxicology reports, witness statements, financial records showing payments to individuals known to be associated with criminal enterprises. It all added up. The case against Drew Kane was becoming stronger by the day. A town in shock. The revelation that Drew Kane had poisoned Ned Quartermaine sent shockwaves through Port Charles. The community that had been dealing with Drew's increasingly volatile and corrupt behavior for months suddenly found itself confronted with the reality that he was capable of murder. Families discussed it over dinner tables. Friends debated it in coffee shops. The police department worked around the clock to ensure that every detail was documented, every piece of evidence preserved, and every witness account recorded. And through it all, Olivia Quartermaine stood firm in her determination to see justice served. She had lost her beloved Ned, but she would make sure his death meant something. She would make sure that the man responsible would face the consequences of his actions. Ned deserves justice. Olivia declared to anyone who would listen. He deserves to have his killer held accountable. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. As the evidence mounted and the case against Drew Cain became increasingly airtight, one thing became abundantly clear. The truth had finally been exposed. The lie that Drew had been attempting to perpetuate had been shattered. And in Port Charles, as in any civilized society, the truth would ultimately prevail. The question now was not whether Drew would face punishment for his crime, but rather how the people of Port Charles would move forward in the wake of such a profound betrayal and tragedy. Ned Quartermaine was gone, but his final act revealing the truth to his devoted wife would ensure that his death would not go unavenged. Justice would be served in peace, however fragile, might finally be restored to a town that had been rocked by too much turmoil for far too long. Next, we will learn about the issue of Jordan Ashford's precarious dance on the edge of morality in Port Charles, where her latest career pivot could shatter her legacy forever. Jordan Ashford has long been a pillar of justice in the turbulent world of Port Charles. Her resume boasting an impressive array of roles that placed her firmly on the side of righteousness. From her days as an undercover day agent, infiltrating dangerous networks with sharp instincts and unyielding resolve, to her tenure as police commissioner, where she navigated the city's underbelly with a steady hand, and later as deputy mayor under the principled Laura Collins, Jordan's path was one of dedicated public service. Yet beneath that steadfast exterior, a restlessness began to stir, a subtle erosion of passion for the bureaucratic drudgery that defined her days in the mayor's office. The endless meetings, the red tape, and the modest salary left her yearning for something more exhilarating, more rewarding qualities that her current life simply couldn't provide. It's this inner discontent that has now propelled her into uncharted territory, where the lines between right and wrong blur like fog rolling off the harbor, threatening to redefine her entire identity. Boredom in the deputy mayor's office became Jordan's silent adversary, a creeping dissatisfaction that made even the most routine decisions feel like chains. Laura Collins, with her unwavering commitment to ethical governance, was a mentor Jordan respected deeply. But the role itself offered little thrill compared to her past adrenaline-fueled investigations. Whispers of opportunity reached her ears through shadowy contacts, leading to an intriguing proposition from the enigmatic Sidwell, a figure whose reputation preceded him like a storm cloud over the docks. Seizing the chance, Jordan accepted the position under the guise of an undercover operation, her mind alight with visions of dismantling Sidwell's empire from within, exposing corruption, rescuing the innocent, and reclaiming her spot as Port Charles' moral compass. She imagined herself as the hero once more, gathering intel that could topple him in a single decisive blow. But as weeks turned into months, the reality of her immersion proved far more seductive than anticipated, pulling her deeper into a web she might never escape. Now, entrenched in her role with Sidwell's organization, Jordan has yet to unearth a shred of damning evidence that could justify her infiltration, a fact that gnaws at her resolve like an unrelenting tide. Instead of breakthroughs, she's Encountered a lavish world of incentives that tempt her, loyalties that generous, paychecks that dwarf her government salary, allowing her to indulge in luxuries once out of reach. Picture her stepping into a sleek modern apartment, overlooking the glittering skyline of Port Charles. Its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the very piers that hold the city's secrets. The spaces of far cry from her previous modest quarters. Plush leather furniture, a state-of-the-art kitchen stocked with gourmet essentials and artwork that whispers of sophistication and power. She's hosted quiet dinners there, savoring the solitude and the subtle thrill of her double life. Her wardrobe, now featuring tailored suits and designer accessories that make her feel invincible. This comfort has woven itself into her daily rhythm, making the idea of blowing her cover seem increasingly distant. A risky gamble against the security she's come to cherish. Yet, this ease comes at a steep price, as Sidwell's operation thrives on shadows and silence, where every perk is a reminder of the peril lurking just beyond the door. Sidwell himself emerges as a formidable antagonist in Jordan's unfolding saga. A man whose cold calculation rivals the chill of Port Charles' winter winds, with zero hesitation when it comes to eliminating obstacles in his path. His background is shrouded in mystery, rumor swirl of international dealings, from smuggling rings to political manipulations that span continents, but in the local scene, he's a predator eyeing expansion with ruthless precision. Jordan's interactions with him have revealed a charisma laced with menace. During a tense late-night summit in a dimly lit warehouse by the waterfront, he laid bare his grand scheme to the group, including Jordan and his right-hand enforcer, Marco. With maps of the dock spread before them and the salty air thick with tension, Sidwell declared his intent to seize control of sunny Corinthos prized piers through the upcoming election, leveraging influence and underhanded alliances to sway voters. But his words carried a darker edge. Should the ballot box fail him, he vowed to resort to brute force, sabotage, coercion, even violence to claim what's his. The threat hung heavy, a promise of chaos that could engulf the entire waterfront district. Jordan sat there, her pulse quickening as Marco nodded in grim agreement, their eyes reflecting the flickering light of strategy. Sessions that blur the line between ambition and atrocity. This electoral gambit isn't mere posturing. Sidwell's reach has already extended to the heart of City Hall, where he's issued veiled warnings to Mayor Laura Collins, attempting to bend her unyielding principles to his will. Laura, ever the steadfast leader with a history of battling corruption from her own web of personal trials, refused to yield. Her defiance sparking Sidwell's eye and setting the stage for potential retaliation. Whispers in the corridors of power suggest he's already dispatched scouts to monitor her movements, planting seeds of doubt among her allies, and even considering more direct intimidation tactics like anonymous notes laced with threats or disruptions to her public appearances. Jordan, privy to these plots through her insider vantage, feels the weight of divided loyalties pressing down, knowing that exposing them could save Laura, but doom her own carefully constructed facade. The mayor's safety now teeters on a knife's edge, a collateral in a game where Sidwell plays for dominance. forcing Jordan to weigh her past OES against the intoxicating pull of her present alliances. Adding layers to Jordan's internal conflict is her long-standing disdain for Sonny Corinthos, the kingpin whose shadowy empire has long clashed with her vision of justice in Port Charles. Sonny's operations from his coffee warehouse fronts to his iron grip on the docks represent everything Jordan has fought against: and regulated power, moral ambiguity, and a disregard for the law that endangers innocence. She's viewed him as a necessary evil at best, a cancer at worst, and her disapproval extends pointedly to Laura's romantic entanglement with him, a union that Jordan sees as a betrayal of the mayor's higher calling. Late-night reflections in her new apartment often circle back to this. How could Laura, a woman of such integrity, entwine her fate with a man whose world is built on deception? This resentment simmers, coloring Jordan's perspective and making Sidwell's overture seem almost reasonable by comparison. A calculated villain against Sonny's chaotic reign. In her mind, the lesser evil might just be the devil she knows through her current employment. A pragmatic choice that could justify her drift if it means curbing Sonny's influence without the messiness of outright allegiance. Compounding this moral tightrope is the sudden vanishing of Jordan's closest confidant, Anna Dean, whose absence leaves a void that echoes through Jordan's decisions like an unanswered echo. Anna, with her international spy savvy and no-nonsense wisdom, has been Jordan's anchor in moments of doubt, offering counsel that cut through the noise of Port Charles intrigues. Their friendship forged in high-stakes collaborations against mutual foes provided Jordan with a sounding board for ethical dilemmas, late coffees, dissecting strategies, shared laughs over survived close calls. But now with Anna off the grid, perhaps entangled in one of her own global missions or worse, targeted by forces like Sidwell's, Jordan navigates this storm alone, without that guiding voice urging her back to the light. The temptations of her role grow louder, the perks more alluring, and the dark side beckons with promises of autonomy and reward. Isolation amplifies her vulnerabilities, turning what might have been a temporary lapse into a potential full embrace of shadows, where old alliances fade and new, dangerous ones take root. Shifting focus to her personal life, Jordan's heart remains tethered to Curtis Ashford, her ex-husband whose presence could be the lifeline pulling her from the abyss. 4 years, even as Curtis built a life with Portia Robinson, Jordan harbored a quiet flame for him, a love born from shared history and the unbreakable bond of their son TJ. Their marriage dissolved in a storm of deceptions. Jordan's lies about her past undercover work, shattering trust. But in recent times, glimmers of reconciliation appeared on the horizon. Dreams of rebuilding what was lost amid Port Charles' endless drama. Curtis, with his grounded demeanor and unwavering moral code, embodies the stability Jordan craves. He once grounded her during turbulent times, reminding her of the woman who chose justice over expediency. Reuniting with him offered a vision of redemption, of family whole again. TJ thriving under united parents, and Jordan reclaiming her path without the taint of Sidwell's world. Curtis would see through her charade immediately, his Disapproval of any ties to such villain. A firm boundary that could snap her back to reality, much like he did during their earlier separations. Yet, this hopeful reunion faces formidable barriers. Chief among them Portia's unexpected pregnancy, a twist that injects fresh complications into an already fragile dynamic. Portia, Curtis, devoted wife and a skilled doctor at General Hospital, has navigated her share of scandals, from hidden family secrets to romantic entanglements that tested loyalties. Now carrying Curtis' child, she represents not just emotional ties, but a tangible future and new life that could solidify their bond and dash Jordan's aspiration for good. The news hit Jordan like a wave crashing against the shore, stirring jealousy and doubt. She pictures Curtis at prenatal appointments, his hand on Portia's growing belly, building a family that excludes her. This development might force Jordan to confront her lingering attachment, questioning why she clings to a man who's moved on, perhaps rooted in her fear of true solitude or the comfort of familiar love amid professional chaos. Without Curtis as her moral anchor, the pull of Sidwell's orbit intensifies, her judgments clouded by heartache and the allure of independence. In the end, Curtis's potential role as Jordan's salvation hinges on his ability to remain a beacon of integrity. But the pregnancy throws a wrench into their delicate balance, leaving her adrift. He divorced her once for betrayals, vowing never to tolerate deceit again. A lesson that could either redeem her or push her further astray if reconciliation slips away. Jordan's choices now teeter on this precipice. Cling to the straight and narrow with Curtis's influence, or let the void propel her into Sidwell's embrace where power and peril await. As poor Charles braces for the fallout of these converging path selections, threats, and personal reckonings, Jordan's journey underscores the fragile nature of allegiance in a city where everyone has secrets. Will she emerge stronger, or will the dark side claim another soul? Stay tuned to ABC General Hospital spoilers for the twists ahead. Music,